Hello, and welcome to this recorded webinar, which will take you through what you need to know before you set up a registered charity. My name is Jenny Wildblood, and I'm one of the information and advice advisors at VOSCA. For those of you who don't know VOSCA, either very much or at all, we are a voluntary organisation ourselves, and our job is to support and enhance the work of the other voluntary organisations in our area, which is basically City of Bristol. But we do also run projects and support work in partnership with the other infrastructure organisations around us, so in South Gloucestershire, Baines and North Somerset. We do a wide variety of things, including giving information, supporting partnerships, running our job site, which is the go-to place to find paid or unpaid opportunities in the sector in Bristol. But we also run a wide variety of activities, advice activities and training. Where we can, these are offered for free if you are an appropriate organisation to benefit. But we also run paid for consultancy and bespoke training. And you'll find out more about this if you go to our website at www.vosca.org. Or you can contact us directly by email on info@vosca.org or call us on 0117 909 9949. This webinar will cover why you might choose to set up a charity, the first steps, the registration process, and we'll finish by looking at the potential pitfalls and how you might be able to avoid them. The aim is to give you an overview of the process, give you some context for the decisions that you'll have to make along the way, help you to think ahead and avoid the common mistakes, and provide useful links to key information. Setting up a charity is a complex and time-consuming job. We can't cover everything, but this aims to be a really good place to start. The links you'll need that are with this recording are on the VOSCA website. So, why set up a charity in the first place? The main and most important reason to set up a charity is that you want to make a positive difference. You know that there's something that needs fixing and you want to fix it, and you feel that the best way to do that is to bring together a group of people to work on making a difference in people's lives. But there are other reasons. If you're already an informal group doing charitable work, but your income is 5k or more annually and likely to remain so, you must register. If you're not reliant on trading, then becoming a charity is a good option. If you are reliant on trading, then perhaps something like a community interest company, a CIC, would be better for you. You'd like access to more grant funding. Small organisations who aren't registered in any way can get small grants, but if your work is expanding and you need more potential funders to apply to and to be able to apply to them for more, then some form of registration is going to be useful. You may just feel that it's time to become more formal and established. And whatever you're thinking of doing, you know that your committee or board will be and always will and always are volunteers. There are very specific circumstances where trustees of a charity can be paid, but they're very rare, and having paid trustees on occasion can affect how fundable you are. So should you consider becoming a CIC instead. If your organisation will be mostly funded through trading, or if you want to be paid by the organisation as one of its leaders, as a director, and retain overall control, then perhaps a charity isn't for you. And we have a Setting Up a CIC webinar. It's available on our website if you'd like to look at this option. So we're firstly going to look at setting up your charitable organisation. When you apply to register with the Charity Commission, it'll be all about proving that you are legally charitable. And you need to prove that to the Commission themselves, but also HMRC, because they are the ones who can give you the permission, if you like, to not have to pay corporation tax. So you make your application to the Charity Commission and then it's checked by HMRC. And that's because as a registered charity, you're exempt from some tax. So you do need to pass stringent tests. So there are two parts to the process. Number one, you set up an organisation that is legally charitable. And number two, you apply to the Charity Commission to be formally registered. Note that you might already be an unregistered charity or community group, but the governing document and maybe the aims even that you have now will probably not meet the criteria for registration. So you do need to make sure that you're using the proper governing document or you won't get through. So the first job is to set up your organisation before you start the registration process. The first trustees of your charity are the ones who'll make all the key decisions, so start by finding the right people to work together. You'll need at least 3 trustees with the time and skills to make it work. These skills could include lived experience, financial, administrative, and service delivery. 3 is the minimum you will need, so it's a good idea to work for a larger team to make sure that the jobs can be shared out properly and that you've got a good range of skills and experience on board. You'll need to decide what structure works for you. There are very good template governing documents that you can use, all available on the YouGov website. So everything has been set up for you and you can just edit and make them your own. But before you can choose which template, there are a few key decisions to make. Will you have a large or small membership, and will you be incorporated? There are 2 different ways that membership can be shown in your structure. One of them is where you have a large group of members and they elect the trustees. And that's useful where you need for the members to have a direct vote on company decisions. Or you can have a small membership model where the members and trustees are basically exactly the same people. And in that model, the trustees appoint each other. If you go for a small membership, you can be a charitable trust if you don't want to be a CIO, or a foundation if you're a CIO. If you go for a large membership, then your model will be called an association model. You don't necessarily need to become an incorporated charity, but it's very well worth thinking about whether or not this is going to be useful for you. Incorporation means you'll be both a limited company and a charity. So trustees will have the protection of limited liability, and the company will be an individual entity that can own property and employ people, etc. There's two ways that you can be incorporated. You can be an entity that is a charity and a company that's registered with and reporting to Companies House as well as the Charities Commission. And this is usually called a charitable company. But there's a more up-to-date way to be incorporated as a charity, and that's using the CIO model, Charitable Incorporated Organisation. And if you go that route, you will only have to report to the Charities Commission. So you can now find the right template governing document for you on the Charity Commission website. And depending on what kind of structure you choose, this will either be called a constitution, which is what it's called if you go for becoming a CIO, or memorandum and articles if you go for becoming a charitable company. It'll also be called a constitution if you decide not to incorporate. Though I have to say, if you have any idea at all that in the future you might need the protection of incorporation, for example, you might want to employ people, or you might want to take out a lease, then it's well worthwhile going for incorporation right from the start. So the core of your application to become a charity will be your governing document. And the governing document is one of the most important things that your charity needs. And it contains your charitable purposes, so the objects of your charity. And those aren't just a list of all the things you'd like to do. They have to be written in a particular way to prove that you are charitable in law. It tells you what you can do to carry out your purposes, your powers. It makes it clear who runs your charity, so the trustees, who can be a member, how meetings will be held, and how trustees will be appointed. If there are any rules about when and how you might be able to pay trustees, and how you run your investments, they'll be in there. And it gives you the power to change some parts of the governing document. That includes your charitable objects, which always have to exactly match what it is that you're actually doing. And those are your amendment provisions. You won't be able to change everything, because if you change some things, that will stop you actually being a registered charity. But the models themselves are very good at explaining which are the bits you can make up your own mind about and which are the bits that need to stay as written. And your governing document also tells you how to close the charity, the dissolution provisions. So if you're using a model, and I really strongly advise you do, as I said, it's quite clear if you download a model, which bits where it's up to you to change and modify for what you want. Sometimes this just means putting in a number, for example, what your quorum will be. Sometimes it means choosing between two different options. So there might be an option to have a certain sort of membership, or an option not to have a certain sort of membership, when all you need to do is delete what you're not going to go for. Once you're quite happy that your governing document is really yours and you're all satisfied with what it says, have a meeting of your trustees to formally adopt this as your governing document. And from now on, you'll need to keep proper minutes of your meetings if you don't already do that. And be ready to submit the signed and dated document to the Commission when you make your application to register. And of course, the first thing you'll need to add to your template is your name, which needs to be not too similar to another charity's name. And you can search the Register of Charities if you aren't sure. and obviously not containing anything offensive and not containing anything misleading. For example, that might make it look as if you're something you aren't. For example, Eastern School, or have authority you don't have, Eastern Community Police. If in doubt, you can email or ring the Charity Commission and ask their advice, but they have very good information on their website explaining where the parameters for your name might be. And of course, as well as needing to be acceptable, if you've got a good name that reflects your purpose and values, that will help you market your services to the people who might need them and raise funds. So it's a good idea to make sure that your name really reflects what it is that you're setting out to do. You'll then need to choose your charitable objects, and they need to be added to the start of your template. And as I said before, your objects aren't just a general statement about what you'd like to achieve, but a statement or a series of statements that are written in the right way to prove you're legally charitable. On the Charity Commission website, there are really good examples of standard charitable objects you can use. So you can look through and see which one or ones might really encompass what it is that you would like them to. Or if you're aware of a charity that's very similar to yours, you can take a look again on the Charity Commission website. You can look them up there and see what their objects are. And you may well just be able to cut and paste. If you really can't find anything at all that meets your needs, then you might have to write your own objects. But if you do that, you must pay careful attention to the language you have to use, because there's quite a lot of detail that you need to think about in order to get them right. There is a step-by-step guide to writing your objects on the Charity Commission website. Not everything that you might do that is nice and good to do is legally recognised as charitable. For example, fundraising just by itself isn't legally charitable. And what you see on screen at the moment are all the things that are overall seen as being charitable. I won't go through them all, but I'm sure you can recognise them and think about charities that you're aware of that work under one or another of these headings. So, as well as having your charitable objects, you'll need to be clear about what your public benefit is. And this can be quite obvious. So I would hope that the charity that you're setting up is going to have a wide public benefit. That doesn't necessarily need to be for everybody. For example, if you're setting up a charity to support people with a particular health issue, then the people with that particular health issue, their friends and families, will be a sufficient public benefit. But you mustn't set up a charity that's only to benefit one person or only to benefit the actual trustees of the charity, though of course you can benefit as well. What a sufficient section of the public is in charity law varies from purpose to purpose. So once you've got your document all ready, bring your trustees together for the first official action, as I've said, where they formally adopt the governing document. Record this in your minutes, and then you're able to go on to start the process of setting up or updating your current bank account, if you have one, in the name of your new charity. So now we're on to the actual process for registration. This is an online process, so Please make sure you share your login details with at least one other trustee, just in case. You can, of course, recover your details, but it can take a while. There is a complete guidance document, and I cannot stress enough, read it before you start. Get as much of the information and documentation that you'll need together before you start as you possibly can. Because if your application is inactive for 3 months, it will be deleted and you'll have to start again right from the beginning. Each answer you give could mean a new set of questions open up, or you have to provide additional information. For example, if you tick yes to working with children and vulnerable people, you'll need to provide your policies and procedures documents, so have those ready. A little tip is, once you start doing your application, you can go through and try and tick and untick a few boxes just to get a feel of how it works. The guidance document is also very clear on what you'll need to provide at particular points, depending on what answers you give. So during the application process, you'll be asked about your charitable aims and purposes, your public benefit, proof that your income is over 5k a year unless you're registering a CIO. CIOs can register with any level of income, including naught. You'll also obviously tell them your name, your bank details. You'll be asked to show your latest accounts if you have them, if you're not brand new. You'll be asked to give your contact details, including a postal address and full details of all trustees. The details of all the trustees come on the trustee eligibility declaration, completed and supplied as a PDF. That is available as a template, again, on the Charity Commission website. You'll also be asked for a PDF of your governing document and any policies or other documents. For example, if you're a community centre, you might be asked for your lease. So any of those documents will also need to be supplied. You do need to check before you start completing the documentation that all of your trustees are eligible. Obviously, it can be rather tactless to go around asking people if they have unspent convictions. What people usually do is just send an email saying, here's the requirements for trustees, and if you have any issues, let us know. So these are listed on screen and also on the Charity Commission website. Some people think that you must be automatically not allowed to take on a trusteeship if you have been convicted of any sort of felony, but that isn't actually the case. There are only very specific things that would make it ineligible for someone with that sort of conviction to serve. So the pitfalls and how to avoid them. Some of the common pitfalls with the application: firstly, not using the models provided, even though they fit what you want to do. Unless you're already a specialist in this kind of area, if for some reason you don't want to use the models, you will have to pay for a solicitor with the right kind of charity experience to write your governing document for you. Another thing is where people just download the governing document and then upload it when they are applying without actually having done any of the work of completion. You also need to answer all the questions. Sometimes that can be a little difficult. You might think, well, I'm not exactly sure what that question means. But for many of them, particularly the ones where they're asking you for more information, they have one or two examples that you can see of what it is that they're looking for. Before you start actually completing the registration documentation, try to put a timetable together. What do you need to have by when? Will somebody be on holiday just when you need their signature? And as I said before, know exactly what additional information you'll need to provide and set it up in advance. So, for example, if you're a brand new organisation and you will be working with children and vulnerable people, work on getting your safeguarding policies and procedures right and getting them accepted by your board before you register your charity. There are common pitfalls with trustees. One is not having enough and the right trustees on board. Trustees not understanding the process and their role in completing it. Sometimes there might be some poor soul who's been told to, go away and do our registration, but everybody needs to be involved. And sometimes trustees don't really grasp the importance of the decisions they're making. For example, that they're going to be bound by the terms of the governing document, so they really need to think about it. And if you aren't all in agreement about your charity's purposes and aims, sort this out now, or it will come to haunt you. Keep all trustees informed and involved. And last but by no means least, registering a charity can be a long job. Take your time and be patient. And the biggest mistake of all is not reading the guidance before you do anything else. In fact, I would read it 2 or 3 times. It will actually save you time, effort, and stress rather than increasing your time, effort, and stress of the application. So you've pressed the button on your application, and what's going to happen next? Well, you could be turned down completely. If that happens, you'll be told why, and usually you can try again once you've fixed the major issue. You might be asked to provide additional information if something that you've written isn't absolutely clear. And hopefully, either at first go or when you've fixed any issues that there might have been, you'll be told that you've been successful. And that's when the fun begins. Start thinking about governance and reporting immediately. So make sure that you understand what your new responsibilities are and make sure that you're thinking ahead about what sort of financial and other information you're going to need to provide at the year end. Make sure your record keeping systems are sufficient and effective. This is obviously you will decide what is sufficient and effective according to your responsibilities and the amount of money that you'll be handling. See what, if any, additional information and training your trustees will need. One of the things that we do at VOSCA a lot, either as part of our open training programme or as part of our bespoke service, is provide training for trustees. And it's one of the things that is a cornerstone of our service. And make sure everyone has read and understood the trustee guidance that you'll be sent. If for some reason you're not sent that guidance, then direct people to the Charity Commission website where there's some good and not too badly written information about the basics of what trustees need to do. And remember that after the end of your first financial year, your first return must be submitted within 10 months. The information you have to provide will change according to your income. Again, check this out on the Charity Commission website. But once you're registered, you will have your own page on the Charity Commission website that will show who you are, what you're set up to do, what kind of governing document you have, what kind of policies you operate under, and who your trustees are. And that will also record your record of submission of reports. So if you're late, your whole report goes red. And at first glance, you might think, well, that's not the end of the world. But the trouble is, when you're applying for funding, one of the very first things most funders will do is go to look at your record on the Charity Commission website. And what they'll want to see firstly is that everything's up to date. So the trustees that you've named on your application are exactly the same as the ones who are on your record. And if your record has turned red, they will say, oh dear, these are people who can't get their accounts in on time. And obviously, they're not going to think much of you if that's the case. Also, to say that you will have, the Charity Commission has a system whereby you get access to your own page on the Charity Commission website so that it can be updated. But that can be a fairly complex system, so it's very important that you make sure that everybody who needs to be registered as being able to edit your page has done so. If you decide to register as a charitable company, you'll also need to make sure that all your company directors, trustees, have verified their identities. I won't say more about that because it's more likely, if you wanted to be incorporated, that you will have gone with the CIO identity. But do be careful if you're a charitable company, so you're sending your annual return to Companies House as well as the Charity Commission, make sure that all of your trustees have registered their identities and given you their registration number so that you can submit your reports. You should receive this really quite nicely written. Charity law is not the most exciting thing to read about, but if you receive a link to this document, please do take a look at it because it can be extremely handy in explaining what your job as a trustee is. So that's the end of the webinar, and I hope it's given you enough ideas for you to go on and take on the job of starting a charity. Remember, when you get your charity set up, and even before then, if you already have a governing document, you could apply to become a member of VOSCA. And that would give you many different benefits, but also mean that you can join with us in making sure that the voice of the voluntary sector of Bristol is heard by those in power. So good luck with your charity, and I hope we'll see you soon.